Hello, what's up, everybody? This is my first attempt at a mixed martial arts, not going to say podcast, but definitely a talk. And today, the subject of discussion is UFC 211, Miocic versus Dos Santos 2. As you may or may not know, this is a fight going down Saturday, May 13th in Dallas, and it will be for the most prestigious awarded in combat sports, the heavyweight championship of the UFC. Now, Stipe Miocic looking to defend his title on the main card, and in fact, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the strawweight female champion of the UFC, will also be looking to defend her title against Jessica Andrade in the co-main event. Also featured on the card, Damian Maia versus Jorge Masvidal, Frankie Edgar versus Yair Rodriguez, Krzysztof Jotko versus David Branch, and Eddie Alvarez versus Dustin Poirier. Now, a disclaimer, Henry Cejudo versus Sergio Pettis was supposed to be the last fight on the main card, but Cejudo, the Olympian, had to pull out because of a hand injury. So, I wish Henry well, and I hope he gets better soon, but replacing that fight is the Jotko versus Branch fight. We're going to get into all of these fights in a bit more detail, but first, let me just say this card is the best card of the year so far. I mean, after 205, 206, 207, UFC fans really were expecting a lot for the new year, and they just hadn't delivered. 208 with the Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandamy, and then Derek Brunson, Anderson Silva, both fights ending kind of questionably. And then you had UFC 209, Woodley Thompson, where Khabib and Tony fell out, and Woodley Thompson was kind of a dud. And then you had UFC 210, and it was kind of weird because Daniel Cormier and Rumble Johnson didn't try to throw hands, he just tried to wrestle, and then he retired. And then you had Weidman Mousasi. Just in general, it hasn't been a great year for the UFC, but this card is looking to really change that up. It is fantastic. It's stacked. The main card is full of exciting matchups, and I'm going to get into it with you right now. We're actually going to start on the prelims with Eddie Alvarez versus Dustin Poirier. This fight, it is entertaining. Let me tell you, this will be a candidate for fight of the night. Both these guys love to go to the middle of the octagon, bite on their mouthpiece, and throw bombs. You have Dustin Poirier coming off that majority decision win to Jim Miller at UFC 208, which won that lackluster card's fight of the night. He is a fighter that, as I said, just likes biting down on his mouthpiece and throwing bombs. He's a gamer. He will come to ruin you. And obviously, Eddie Alvarez, for the casual fan, will know that his last loss was to Conor McGregor at UFC 205, where he lost his lightweight championship. But you know what? That fight really doesn't show the full story. I mean, if you look at Eddie Alvarez's record, he's beaten the who's who of the lightweight division. If you look, Rafael Dos Anjos, former champion, Anthony Pettis, former champion, Gilbert Melendez, former champion, Michael Chandler, Patricky Pitbull, 2 Bellator champions currently. In my mind, he's a Hall of Famer, and I think he outmatches Dustin Poirier in this fight. A matchup of 2 pretty solid nicknames as well. Eddie, the Underground King Alvarez versus Dustin, the Diamond Poirier. Both people looking to really put on a good performance and get back into title contention in the 155-pound division. I'd say if Eddie is in the same mental headspace that he was against Conor, Dustin Poirier will get the win by knockout. But if Eddie comes ready to fight, I believe that he and his skill will take over, his experience, and he will grind out a unanimous decision victory. The odds on this one actually favor Dustin Poirier, but you know what? I think that Eddie Alvarez is coming here to prove a point that Not necessarily it was a fluke what happened at UFC 205, but that's definitely not who he is as a fighter. I think he really wants people to remember him in a better light, and this is his opportunity to win back some people. Moving on, we have David Branch versus Krzysztof Jotko. Two relatively unknown fighters for the casual fans. I'll be honest, I had to look both of these guys up before doing this, but one thing that really strikes out at me is David Branch used to fight in the UFC, went to World Series of Fighting, won 2 belts at the same time. He was the champ, as Conor McGregor would say, and now he's returning to face stiffer competition. He wants to test himself against the best in the world, and his first opponent is Krzysztof Jotko. Now, Jotko, coming off that win against Talis Lidis at UFC Fight Night Beta versus Nogueira 2. Kind of outclassed Lidis in that fight, and he's ranked number 9 in the world. And I think it's a good, solid test for David Branch, who's on a 9-fight win streak over in World Series of Fighting. His last loss coming to Anthony Rumble Johnson back in 2012. He's been undefeated for 5 years, and he's got a hype train behind him. I don't know if I can bet against him in this fight. He's a great wrestler. Jotko is more of a stand-up guy. His last loss coming via guillotine choke. I think David Branch exploits Jotko on the ground. He takes him down. He grinds him out. He's got 4 submission wins in World Series of Fighting, so I think his expertise on the ground will come in handy, and he'll submit Jotko in the second round to win the fight. The odds for this fight actually support Jotko. Wow, I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought that the hype train of David Branch would have given him the edge, but nope. To the contrary, I disagree with these odds. If I was a betting man, which I'm not, because I do not have the money to be a betting man, I would bet on David Branch to win by submission. Okay, now let's move on to the top 4 fights of the card, the fights that everybody's really looking forward to the most. Starting with Frankie Edgar versus Yair Rodriguez. This fight is extremely interesting and has title implications in the featherweight division. Obviously, Jose Aldo versus Max Holloway goes down in Brazil at UFC 212. Frankie Edgar, man, I don't know if the UFC is throwing Yair to try to make a name off of him, because Yair has this unbelievable hype train, but god darn it, it's hard to bet against Frankie Edgar at this point. If you look at his last 10, he's fought the who's who. Jeremy Stevens, Jose Aldo, Chad Mendes, Uriah Faber, Cub Swanson, BJ Penn, Jose Aldo, Benson Henderson, Gray Maynard. These are legends of the sport. And the only losses he's suffered have been when he's fighting for the championship belts. And they've all been unanimous decision losses, except for the Benson Henderson split decision loss. He's gone 50 minutes twice. He's gone 25 minutes 4 times with UFC champions. That should tell you all you need to know about Frankie Edgar. He is phenomenal. And they're using him to test where Yair Rodriguez is, which I don't really agree with. If you look at his record, I mean, he knocked out BJ Penn, which was a beautiful knockout, but quite frankly, BJ Penn had no business being in that octagon. Alex Caceres, Andre Fili, Dan Hooker, Charles Rosa, these aren't big names, and while he did look good against them, that's a huge jump. I mean, going from BJ Penn to Frankie Edgar is ridiculous. I have no idea how he's going to react. He's got these wild spinning kickboxing attacks, the jumping head kicks, the flying knees. I think Frankie's experience, his wrestling, his jiu-jitsu is going to come in handy here. He's going to take him down, and he's going to overwhelm him. And I think he either grinds out a unanimous decision, and it won't be close, or he submits Yair Rodriguez in the second round, I'll say. I will additionally say that I believe Yair Rodriguez will be a champion in the future, but this is just too much too soon. I mean, as I mentioned, Frank Yeager's just beat the who's who. Jeremy Stevens, Chad Mendes, Uriah Faber, Cub Swanson, BJ Penn, Charles Oliveira, all wins. I rest my case. The odds support what I'm saying. It's not really close. Frank Yeager, the favorite. You know what? I would find it very hard to bet against him. Moving on, we have Damian Maia and Jorge Masvidal. A fight which has title implications in the welterweight division. I would say that this is a crazy matchup. I can't believe this fight came to fruition. I don't know how Maia's not fighting for the welterweight strap. On a 6-fight win streak, beating Carlos Condit, Matt Brown, Gunnar Nelson, Neil Magny in his last 4, 3 by finish. But the UFC is doing him no favors by giving him Jorge Masvidal, who is, in his last 10, 7 and 4, 7 and 3, but those 3 losses are all split decisions. So realistically, he could be 10-0 if a few judges had gone the other way. He's beaten Cerrone, Ellenberger, Pearson. He lost to Larkin and Henderson by split decision, but again, a lot of people had him winning those fights. This is a tough matchup for Damian Maia, who is a phenomenal ground fighter. His jiu-jitsu is ridiculous, better than world class. He might be the best jiu-jitsu practitioner ever to fight in the UFC. I think this fight will go one of two ways. I think if it stays on the feet, Jorge Masvidal clips Damian Maia and knocks him out. And I think if Damian Maia can control him in the clinch, get him down, and take his back, I think it's going to be all over for Jorge Masvidal. I don't think this goes to the judges. It will be a finish, and I believe that Damian Maia will submit Jorge Masvidal. So I'm predicting 3 straight submissions here. So could be a finish. Could be a finish happy card, which would be awesome. But yeah, I think just Damian Maia is gonna overmatch Jorge Masvidal on the ground and tap him out. To the co-main event we go. We now have Joanna Jędrzejczyk against Jessica Andrade. Joanna, undefeated from Poland, 13-0. She's the women's champion, coming off 3 wars against Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Claudia Gadelha, Valerie Letourneau. All 3 fights went the distance, 25 minutes. You know what? Jessica Andrade, she's a tank. She's a powerhouse. She used to fight at 135 bantamweight, but she's dropped down, and she's coming off 3 straight wins. Angela Hill, Joanne Calderwood, and Jessica Penne. I just, the way Jessica Andrade rushes forward, throwing hands the way she does, I just think Joanna's striking. She's going to piece her apart on the feet, and I think it goes the distance, but if not, I think Joanna finishes her, just because Jessica gets hit way more than Joanna, and Joanna's so precise with those shots. I don't think this is going to be close. I think it's going to be something like a 50-45 or a 49-46 decision. I don't think Jessica Andrade is going to be the one to dethrone Joanna Jędrzejczyk. So yeah, I have Jędrzejczyk by unanimous decision. And now the main event between Junior Dos Santos and Stipe Miocic. A rematch, as I mentioned. They fought in 2014, which resulted in a Stipe Miocic loss. Junior Dos Santos won by unanimous decision. Some people say Stipe Miocic won that fight. So not without controversy, but you know what? Since that fight, Stipe Miocic has just been on a tear with 4 straight knockouts of the who's who of the heavyweight division: Mark Hunt, Andrei Arlovski, and then he beat Fabricio Werdum to capture the heavyweight championship by first-round knockout, and then he defended his belt against Alistair Overeem by first-round knockout. He's been on a tear, and if you get a big man like that on a tear, I don't know how you feel confident betting against him. Since the 2014 fight, Junior Dos Santos has fought twice. He lost to Alistair Overeem by second round TKO, and he beat Ben Rothwell by unanimous decision. I find it hard to believe that Junior Dos Santos is going to come back after a year off and beat Stipe Miocic. I know MMA math doesn't really work this way, but you know what? Stipe Miocic's last fight, he knocked out Alistair Overeem. Junior Dos Santos' last loss, he lost to Alistair Overeem. The odds support me. You know what? Stipe Miocic is the champion. I think he neutralizes the incredible power of Junior Dos Santos' boxing and kicks. He pushes him up against the fence, mixes takedowns with ground and pound, and either knocks him out or wins by decision. So I have Stipe Miocic retaining the heavyweight championship, breaking the record tying the record for most consecutive defenses with Brock Lesnar. And I think it's going to be a great card. I mean, through and through, a lot of good names. But as I said, I'm just going to recap. I have Alvarez by decision, Branch by submission, Edgar by submission, Maia by submission, Jędrzejczyk by decision, and Miocic either by knockout or decision, but definitely Stipe retaining his belt. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. Give me some feedback. I'd like to hear your opinion. And if you want me to do this again in the future, I'd love to. Thanks for tuning in. Again, this fight goes down April 13th at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Check it out, UFC 211, Miocic Dos Santos 2. Thanks.